What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another oil painting demonstration live here on YouTube. It is another Wednesday, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So let's just go ahead and get started here. If you're interested in any materials similar to the ones that I'm using here, there should be information listed in the description box of the video for you. But again, any questions that you have while I'm painting, feel free to ask, as this is a live painting session. So what I'm doing here is getting an idea of the placement of the head, how big I want the head to be, and I'm drawing with raw umber, and the paint is thinned out a little bit with odorless mineral spirits. I am working on a cotton canvas that has been toned ahead of time, neutral gray with acrylic paint. So I'm just working on an acrylic tone, which you can totally do, even though you're working with oil paint, but you don't want to do the reverse. So I got the abstract shapes for the face. The top of the hair is probably going to fit somewhere about there. I want to make sure that there's going to be some distance on the back here for the reflection. It might fit right about there. So that's good to go. Angle of the head. And now the hair on the other side. I like to work with the outside shapes towards the inside shape, so outside in. And this is different from any of the other materials except for Pastel. It's pretty similar to Pastel, or I guess Pastel is pretty similar to this for me. Axes of the eyes, eyebrows, axes of the eyes themselves, concavity of the eye socket, a little shape there for where the nose will eventually fit, eyebrow, angle of the eyes, mouth will be roughly there. And now we're good to start to block in some shapes with color, and then we'll figure the rest out using the shapes of color. And I will use a different brush, and it's going to be the same type of brush. It is a size 2 filbert bristle brush. Brand is Silverbrush Grand Prix. These brushes are different than what I would use with acrylic. I would not use bristles with acrylic. So this is going to be my first little guesstimation for a skin tone. Test it out. That's alright. Might need to be a little bit more orangey. The colors that I'm using are very simple colors. For my yellow, it's yellow ochre. For my red, it's cadmium red. For my blue, I'm using right now cerulean blue. White is titanium white. Let's test this out again. That's pretty good. And I'm going to use this to draw with. Now, back when I was in school in Philly, this was referred to as a duotone, which is not true because it's not two tones. At least it won't be two tones for long. What it is it's an underpainting. It's a grisaille, but it's a active underpainting. So I'll be painting wet into wet for the entire thing. Hey, new singer, welcome. I'm doing well. How are you? Hopefully you're doing well, staying safe. Apparently there's another sickness going around, so hopefully everybody is staying safe. Now that I've blocked in the light for the face, I'm going to switch back to the dark brush. That's going to be raw umber, red, black, a little bit of blue. Just create a nice brown, darkish brown. And we're going to start to chisel away at the dark shapes, the light and dark shapes here. Getting a sense of proportion as we go. Now I can use the light and the dark brush to chisel away as I go. Hey, Corin, Mark L, welcome, welcome. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is for everybody. And we'll just mix directly onto the canvas here. A little something that I've picked up from Pastel. We can mix directly on canvas. I don't really know how to do short videos just yet, but I did try to upload one to my Instagram about the Friday pastels. So I think it went through. I don't know really, but I think it went through. So I'll continue to create those short videos on Instagram, and we'll create some short videos for YouTube as well to help to promote these public streams. Again, these are totally free. You don't have to pay anything to join them. I'm just happy to be here to help you. Hey Giselle, welcome, welcome. Like I said, mixing directly on here. Okay, so now I can go ahead and mix these colors together, create a middle value, and we're gonna start to create planes out of this. Cadmium red is a very strong color, so I'm gonna have to use a lot of the blue and greens. That green that I used was cadmium green. So we've got cadmium green and cadmium red, which is gonna give us a nice neutral value, which we have here. And we're gonna use this to carve out some planes. Okay, so carving out some planes here is the goal. Hey Fatim, welcome, welcome. Welcome everybody. Remember, if anybody is new here, please let me know. For those of you that have been attending the streams regularly, I'm so thankful to have you back here. Such as Uncle Earl, Mauve. I know I'm probably not pronouncing your names correctly. Sorry about that. Giselle, Mark L, and everyone who's been attending these streams. These are going to be approximately 3 hours, no more than 3 hours at a time, with breaks every hour. I'll have a video of Hugo playing tomorrow. For Acrylic Thursday, we're going to do a pet portrait. So I've got some pictures of my Shiba Inu in mind. I tend to always paint him like all the time. But for future pet portraits, we can work something out. Maybe find a little common ground, something that you want me to paint, something that has decent composition for me to create. So we can work some things out in the future. But anyway, for now, just simple planes, really. I should have a different brush for that, but I used the shadow brush. Really easily carving that plane in there, no worries at all. Hey Augustin, welcome, welcome. I'm glad you like the explanations of the color mixtures, but of course this would be pretty basic for you at the level that you have achieved thus far. Simple stuff with this start here, nothing too complicated. A little bit of black and alizarin. I finally went to the store, by the way, so I bought some alizarin. I can't believe how expensive these colors are now. It's ridiculous. Yeah, that's That's how it is, people. Stuff gets expensive. Okay, filling in some more of the dark just so I can have a thicker value there. I'm gonna go ahead and add a greenish mixture using cerulean blue, cadmium green. So MAEVE is pronounced Mave, maybe. We'll call you May for short. Let's call you May. May for short. So May, welcome. Again, yeah, sorry for my mispronunciations there. And I'm glad to have you, May. This is going to be a reddish guesstimation for where the mouth is going to fit. Not by any means supposed to be exact. This color here is it's a fake version of lead tin yellow. It's called nickel yellow. It's an old color that I've had for a while. So I decided to just take that color out. The planes are quite blocky at this stage. Really simple. Change your colors frequently. With oil paint, I have a lot of leeway because these colors will not dry on me as opposed to acrylic. But as opposed to acrylic, I have to be a little bit sharper with my edges in terms of the specificity, because it's a little bit too easy to make a mistake and push a shape around somewhere it's not supposed to go, like the nose, for example. But again, this is a very simplified way of working, and thus the title, Portrait Painting Simple or Not. Hey Seth, paint a smiley face. Yeah, we've started a portrait with a smiley face once in the past, just to show that you could start with anything. She's somewhat smiling in the picture, but yeah, no, not really all the way smiley. But in the future, perhaps we can have some more expressions. I tend to choose images that are closer to what you would paint if you were working from life. So that's why I choose the images that I choose. Pastel gives you a lot of similar color handling abilities, in the sense that of course it's not ever going to dry, but it's different in the sense that you have to layer, but it forces you to really think about planes. So for this one, I'm actually kind of starting it like a pastel, in the sense that I'm not worried about the fine finish of anything. Usually I'm a little bit more cautious about my starts than this. So I've learned a lot from pastel in particular that I'm transferring slowly into my oil and acrylic. But with oil, it's so simple to just move things around. Like, I'm not worried about the mouth landing in the wrong spot, right? Like right now the mouth probably landed in the wrong spot. But keeping these shapes simple and easy is going to be key, because moving them around is what makes this easier than you would think, more simple. So in a sense, portrait painting is simple in the sense that you're working with simple shapes, but it's not so simple if you if you go too complicated too early. There are counter examples for pretty much everything in life. So just take everything I say with a grain of salt. You can always find a counter example. For example, you can start a painting with absolute precision and detail and work from one eye to the other, spend a month on half of the face and then move to the other half of the face and create a pretty strong image that way. I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is what makes this more simple is the patterns. There are very repeatable patterns. The planes of the face are the same for most individuals. All you have to do is translate the similarities or differences between the generic human head and what you're looking at. If you can understand how your model deviates from the generic human head, it is pretty strong. It's going to help you be more relaxed. Like right now, I'm basically chilling. Like I'm not worried about absolutely anything with this painting. I already know the trajectory that it's going to head, and I'm not at all worried about the technique, the detail, the form, or anything like that. I know that we will work up to all of that stuff progressively. Seth asked a question: which one is best, acrylic, oil, watercolor, or pastel? It depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, that's not much of an answer, but there's a reason why most of the old master paintings were done in oil paint as opposed to say acrylic, and that's a really easy answer for you because acrylic wasn't invented yet. So that's why a lot of old master paintings weren't done in acrylic. But acrylics themselves have a certain set of challenges that don't translate well to academic atelier style painting, because you oftentimes find that in ateliers there are layering processes or whatever that you need an oil painting to dry in order to glaze it and things like that. But if I were to tell you what's the best, I would say the best is no longer oil paint. The best used to be oil paint, hands down. The best was oil paint many years ago because that's what there was. And there's so many advancements now with water mixable oil paints, acrylics, watercolors too, even though I haven't gotten to them yet. There's so many advancements that really you can take almost any material as far as you're willing to take it. So yeah, I'm not really that partial to any of the materials anymore. Ever since exploring these other materials, and when I first started, pretty much everything I was taught was oil paint. So if you had asked me just last year, I would say, oh yeah, oil paint without a doubt. Look at all the stuff we can do. But look at all the stuff that you can do with pastel, all the stuff that you can do with water mixables, things like that. Like there's so much that you can do. There's no reason to be stuck with one if you want to explore. Fatim, which one medium would I use? If I were to only use one medium, I think that's what your question is. If I were to only use one medium, one material, it would probably still be oil paint. If someone were to lock me up in a dungeon for the rest of my life and I could only use one material, then it would be oil paint just because of the rich history behind it. But I would really miss pastel and acrylic. Right now my favorite is pastel. That's currently my favorite. But oil paint for sure because, well, the history, right? With oil paint. Oil paint just has that rich history that none of the other materials have yet because they're not old enough to have that history. A good question. I appreciate that question. Don't be afraid to ask any questions, everyone, those of you that are watching this live. Remember, these streams are every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Wednesdays is oil paint, as we're doing today. Thursdays is acrylic, and Fridays is pastel. Currently, my favorite out of all of them is pastel because of the versatility and the hands-on quality. And I'm actually treating this very similar to pastel. So no surprise there. I'm going to switch brushes here, and I'm going to put a dark bluish background now. Ultramarine blue and cerulean. Use a little bit of medium. I'm using Neo McGill. But thankfully, I'm never going to have to be isolated to one material, right? Like, I'm not going to be isolated to one medium. Those of you that have difficulties using oil paints, there's no reason for you not to use acrylic or water mixable oil paint. Ideally, try them both, and you'll find that you will be able to create a lot of amazing imagery with either material. But yeah, oil painting has like a really rich history that none of the other materials have developed yet, but they will over time. You may be watching this 100 years in the future, probably in data banks from YouTube videos from 100 years ago, and you're probably now saying, wow, I guess he was right. There is a lot of rich history with acrylic now. Even though that guy is long dead, I've been watching his videos in the Museum Ancient Video Archives. You know, things like that, right? There can be a rich future, a rich history in these materials, but it just started, so really there's no telling what the future holds with these materials. Assuming there is going to be those kinds of storage data clouds from videos from hundreds of years in the past. Big shapes, just like with any material, is universal. And if you work with shapes and you don't think about the if you don't think about the portrait as a person, don't think about this as a human. Now, if you can do that, wow, you're gonna get to such a high level much faster. So Jeremy question, would you ever consider doing a portrait in the style of, I have no idea if it's Giger or it's for a fun challenge? BEKS. I'd have to look them up. Is that that's not Banksy, right? That's a graffiti artist. I'd have to look them up. Fun challenges. I'm open to fun challenges. I haven't really done much painting in the style of other painters, but I'm open to anything. I mean, one time I did a painting opposite-handed here, so you know, I'm open to anything. So yeah, of course. Throwing these shapes around is a lot of fun. It's much harder to gain a very sturdy support with oil paint than it is with acrylic or pastel because it remains wet the entire time. So that paint handling is a tad bit more difficult with oil paint, in my opinion. Hrgiger. I'd have to look that one up, but I'm open to almost anything. So I'll look that person up. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your comments. Tomorrow's pet portrait demo or pet portrait live session is going to be because someone asked for it. All you gotta do is ask for it. Ask and you may receive. Now I'm getting caught up in details, unnecessary details that I don't need quite yet on the side of the face. It's absolutely not necessary yet. So I'm gonna work all around. Hey Alessandro. No questions, no problems. Don't be ashamed to ask any questions. The more questions you ask, the more you're gonna help me because YouTube is gonna say, oh, this guy's somewhat relevant, and so it'll promote my streams more often. So I don't mind. I've been painting since 2000. Well, this kind of painting since 2008, 2009. How many years ago was 2008?
It was 16 years ago.
Oh, geez. 16 years. Yep, 16, 15 years. Yeah, it's a long time. It's a long time. Pretty much half of my life at this point. Been painting for half of my life. Think about that. Jeez, that's a long time. And I'm still learning every day. Still pushing the limits of what I can do every day. What I struggle with more than anything is subject matter. What to paint, really. That's my biggest problem, is what in the world do I want to paint? How do I want to paint it? And if you look at art history, a lot of painting tends to repeat itself. You look at Peter Paul Rubens, and then you think about the dang it, what are they called? I don't know, like Anthony Van Dyck's kind of time period. Or if you look at Sargent, well, Sargent's not all that unique. Think about Titian. I think Titian had a lot of painterly like qualities way before Sargent, and Velasquez too, way before Sargent. So a lot of this stuff was already a thing before someone got credited for it. Like the abstract impressionists, they didn't do anything new. Composition was always abstract to begin with. Some of the best abstract paintings are compositions of a Peter Paul Rubens, compositions of a who's a good one to look at for that? Caravaggio. Hey Alessandro, thank you. Yeah, any questions you have, art related or pet related or pool related, or I'm also a very beginner billiard player. My Fargo is almost going to be almost 400, but still very much a beginner. But yeah, I mean, anything you want to talk about here, feel free to ask. And I'd love to tell you all the differences between pastel and oil paint, because the differences between them are actually not that much. I really like pastel now that I've been learning it. I just posted a short video on my Instagram for, I think, the first time. It took me a while to figure out how to do it, but I think I figured out how to do it. with last week's pastel. And don't get me wrong, I really like acrylic too for, for studio paintings, for long-term studio paintings. Acrylic actually has more advantages to it than, say, oil painting does, because you can paint for 5 minutes while you're waiting for your wife to get ready so you go out to eat and spend money you shouldn't be spending. But you could paint for like 5 minutes, open up your Stay Wet palette, and you can paint for a little bit, and then put your brushes back in a water cup and go to dinner and spend money that you shouldn't be spending. So there's a lot you can do with each of these materials. But pastel has definitely had a positive impact on me as a painter thus far. And I'm using a lot of what I've learned in pastels here today. Mixing on canvas is nothing new. That's something that I've done for a long time. So that would, I guess, make sense why I'm able to work with pastels so quickly. I mean, learn it so quickly. But I tell you, there's a lot of stuff that transfers between all of these materials. Acrylic, pastel, oil paint, water mixable oil paint. There's so much that transfers over. It's amazing. I like to use Neo McGilp medium for oil painting, both long-term studio paintings and short alla prima style paintings like this one. But we will take this one as far as a developed studio painting. We'll take this one as far as possible. Hey, Harsan K, thank you. I'm glad you've been watching since 2019. That's awesome. Thank you so much. A lot of what I've been doing recently is similar to what I've done in the past, but at a much faster rate than I had ever done before. And I've been training a lot. I've basically been putting myself back into training mode for the past couple weeks now. So I, like for example, right before this, I did a pastel study of this painting. So I kind of already knew what big shapes would do what, like what effect would be useful for what. So I knew ahead of time. Question from AD Art. Have you tried rosemary brushes? If so, is there a model you like or avoid, like ivories, for example? Well, I mean, I'm hoping ivory is not made from ivory, but I mean, if it was, then yeah, I would avoid that for sure. But I haven't tried rosemaries. I did try a student's rosemary brush once when I was teaching in-person classes eons ago, but ever since I have not. And nothing wrong with rosemary brushes, not that I know of, but I've been holding on to my Silverbrush Grand Prix for a while because, well, I don't have a lot of money to spend, so I just use what I have. I've had these brushes for a long time. These Silverbrush Grand Prix last a very long time, so I have no issues with these bristles. So Alessandro, your true acrylic colors are so comfortable to use. However, we cannot deny that oil painting is a superior level. Yeah, I mean, that could be argued to so many extents, right? Just like anything in life. But oil painting has, like I said, more than anything, it's that rich history that makes oil painting have this perception of just strength and like demanding more of itself. My heroes all of my heroes, with the exception of Sargent, because Sargent did use watercolor sometimes, but most of my heroes, like Nelson Shanks, pretty much only used oil paint for the majority of what they did. I mean, you have Daniel Green, who did a lot of pastel, but that's rare to find that. So the future of art is still developing. We're still in the beginning stages of what art can be and what it will be. So there will be many acrylic artists that are going to emerge from ateliers and things like that, and be able to do everything that they do, that they were taught with oil paint, but with acrylic. But you do have to get over a certain learning curve. There's definitely a learning curve involved in it, no doubt about it. But there's a certain comfort to knowing that you can work on something for like a couple minutes and then go away and not worry about the paint drying on you or the brushes getting ruined. Like, you can use almost any brushes you want with acrylic, and you can use cheap brushes. It's fine because you don't have to worry about, like with oil paint, for example. The important thing about oil paint is with brushes is that you want your brush to hold a lot of paint, but you want it to have a soft touch. That's really hard to do with cheaper brushes, with oil paint. But with acrylic, from my experience with acrylic, you don't need that much paint on your brush because it's going to have a smooth application, because acrylics are not as heavy as oil paints. So you could use almost any brush. Hey, Harsh, HARSHAD, thanks for commenting that. Yeah, that's a name for someone to look up. I don't know who that is. But yeah, acrylic is definitely a very powerful material when used properly, for sure. Absolutely. There's so much you can do with each one of these materials. But here's something that is unique to oil paints that's not as similar from my findings with the other materials. And that is the darks with oil paint. I guess because of the oily nature to it, the darks with oil paint are, when you see these paintings in person, there's really nothing like it. And even with the gloss medium from Golden, I really struggle to get my darks to be that dark with acrylic. So that's why with the acrylic I tend to work on the white surface as opposed to working on a tone like this one. But you know, all that stuff can change. So it uses matte, medium, builds up values and layers. Okay. You see, I think matte would be something interesting to try, so thank you for that. I'll look up the matte mediums as opposed to the gloss. Perhaps that will have a different effect. But you have to stick with what you enjoy. It's fun to try different materials. after so many years of painting. But I would definitely suggest that you stick with what you enjoy, especially if your painting time is limited. If you're only able to paint maybe like, I don't know, like less than 10 hours a week, you want to stick with something that you enjoy. So these are really great comments today, everyone. I'm gonna definitely look up these names. I really appreciate the comments, everyone. Let's see, gloss is more fluid and matte medium is the acrylic binder, thicker and dries transparent. Alright, we're gonna try those out. Except I do like more opaques from time to time. We definitely want to experiment with different materials for sure, different mediums. I don't see why not. I like it. I like the ideas here. Still working general shapes. I don't want to get into too many specifics too soon. But I did do a study of this in Pastel before starting today's stream. So if it seems like I'm painting better or worse than I usually do, it's because I've practiced for this. Hey Ed, so you love how the shadows blend into nothing? Well, that's good. That's good. I like that kind of nothingness as well. Alessandro, you wrote, what is the most expensive artwork you have sold? Kind of a personal question, but yeah, I mean, I'm not some big time famous painter, so no, I've never sold anything for a ton of money. The most I've ever sold for, I think, is, let me see, was about 2,000. That's the most I've sold. And that was a painting that I worked on for months. Yeah, only 2,000. So no, I'm not a big time major leagues artist here. I'm not in portrait artist of the year or anything like that, but you know, I'd say I'm a painter for the people, though I will do the best I can to get into some galleries. I mean, I have one studio painting that I have been working on for about I don't know, now like 2 months now or so. The gallery paintings take time. Imagine this is just going to be a head and shoulders, right? But everything that you learn during these shorter paintings can translate really well into your more long-term paintings. And it can make you a pretty penny too. Compared to billiards, I've only ever won, the most money I've ever won in billiards in a tournament was like 660. So yeah, big difference there. When you paint the color of one plane in comparison to the surrounding planes with oil paint, it is much easier working wet into wet, but it also creates difficulties in the sense that any wrong move you could, any little slip up can, you have to repaint it. You don't have that dry layer underneath, and it gets even more difficult with pastel, which is what I like really about pastel. I really love the challenge. Hey Cindy, welcome, welcome. Welcome everyone. Remember, tomorrow will be pet portrait in acrylic. And then we'll return to portrait painting with pastels on Friday. And you can paint with palette knife with acrylic as well, I just haven't done it. But with oil paint, one of the first things I was taught was actually how to paint with palette knife. We even did an entire painting with palette knife once. An entire portrait painting of all things. SND, oh thank you, thank you. Big shapes into little shapes. That is what will make this more simple. Or not, it depends. Because what makes it more complicated is if we start to think about it as human. Once you think about it as human, then the ship sails away. And we find ourselves in La La Land. And in La La Land, up is down and left is right. Pressure starts to make you sweat, and anxiety makes you second guess yourself. So why do that to yourself? Life is already difficult enough without all the anxiety produced by portrait painting. Especially when you think of your portrait as a person, think about it as shapes. Know that things are going to go really wrong before they go really well. If you have access to painting groups where you can paint from a live model, do it, because it's an extra bit of pressure, and really it's the best way to learn. I absolutely hate this area. I hate where I live. This area is horrible. There's no, I moved from where I used to live. I used to live in Maryland, and there was so much, which I think there's a comment I still have to respond to. Somebody asked me where in Maryland I live, but I don't live in Maryland anymore. We're not in Kansas anymore. We're not in Maryland anymore, folks. Yeah, I hate this place. I'm in Alexandria, Northern Virginia. I hate this place. It's totally artless. I mean, they have a school. Nothing wrong with the school they have here, but it's a school, right? It's not like artists can gather together and work from a live model like in Maryland. So, yeah, I hate this place. But if you live in a place where there are live painting sessions, take advantage of it. Take advantage of it as much as you can, because those opportunities are really limited. another thing that really presents a little bit of positive pressure is videoing yourself. So video yourself painting from time to time, and same thing with a lot of sports. When you practice and you video yourself, I'm treating this kind of like a sport. It's a very active thing. So if you video yourself, you get to see your form, you get to see where mistakes tend to happen, you get to see the big picture when you video yourself. But I was very fortunate when I was younger. Having grown up in the area I did, there was painting for models almost like 4 days a week, different painting groups that I could go to, all within less than an hour drive. It was crazy. And in Northern Virginia, all they have here is shopping, eating, and there's a really great pool scene here. I do like that, but it's not like I'm trying to be a professional pool player or anything like that. Like, it's just something I do for fun. But this is a great area for that for sure. I'm using a acrylic brush for this. I could use a Sable brush, but I've kind of learned how to get the most out of the cheaper equipment. Subtlety gets more down to cosmetics, and it makes sense that we're approaching the subtlety now. Usually the first break, so we're 8 minutes away from the first break. So the first break is where we get into all those little subtleties that we know and love and hate. But to me, it's great. I really enjoy entering the subtleties. So we're entering the subtleties a little faster than normal. And the key here is the further you get into the subtleties, the more you want to stay back. Remember, the more you get into subtleties, the further back you want to go. Further back you want to stand, the further back you want to sit. That's because when you get into subtleties, human tendency is to grow things. The eye, as you start to add more development into it, you start to place more importance to it, and you naturally psychologically want to make it bigger, because we tend to think bigger is better, bigger is more important. So be aware of that. That's going to happen. And take breaks as often as possible. So I switched to the smaller brush now because all of these planes are roughly being subdivided into the width of this brush. So the width of the brush itself is analogous to the width of the planes that I'm subdividing. smaller brushes give you more control, which is a good thing, but sometimes teachers will tell you to use a bigger brush than you need to, and I've done that many times. I think I did that last week. But the choice is yours, really, what you want to do. When you're learning something new in life, there's going to be the best practices, simple shapes, stay back as often as possible. And if you learn by doing what the best practices are, your learning will accelerate. But you can always deviate to a certain degree from the best practices. Find what works for you and then dial it back. One of the most common comments that I've heard from people taking classes at Atelier, classical art school, is I've learned more in the past 3 hours than I've learned in 3 years of art school or like art college. It's kind of the most common comment that I've heard, and probably is not the same today anymore because YouTube. But there's so much that goes into this type of painting that is repeatable. So if you want to learn how to paint like this, it's a very repeatable thing. It's something that you can learn. But it's a skill that always has to be sharpened. I find that having explored with the different materials has helped me tremendously with oil painting. At least that's what I think. I feel more confident. I feel more at ease. It's a nice experience, really. 3 minutes till the first break. So we've already entered the subtlety stage with this painting. Moving a little bit faster than usual. Stay as far back as you can. Try to simplify what you're looking at by squinting with your eyes, but not so much that you're going to hurt your eyes. So what they used to say is stand back and squint. Paint what you see when you're squinting, but don't squint too much. I'll tell you, don't squint too much because you don't want to mess with your eyes. These are all pieces of advice and techniques that translate well to painting from life. So what I want is for you to get the skill sets needed to paint from a live model. Even if you live in an area, unfortunate to live in an area like I do where there's not much painting sessions from life. You can still learn how to paint from life. Okay, question from Brian. You wrote, what's the best color for a palette to be when learning to mix oil paints? You mean like the best palette to use to learn oil paints? I'd say the Zorn palette plus raw or burnt umber would be the best. The Zorn palette is cadmium red for your red yellow ochre for your yellow, and black for your blue, and that in most instances the black is ivory black. But I would argue that you may want to add an umber into the mix, like raw umber, because when you're drawing with paint, like I did in the beginning here, it's kind of annoying to have to mix your drawing color. So the umber, the only purpose that the umber would serve would be to help you to draw. But you can also use it as a color as well. But I appreciate the question. And I start my students off with that same exact palette. I think it's easier to start with a limited palette for portrait and then experiment with an extended palette for color study, and then bring that element back into portraiture. I'm gonna fix this shape here before I go on break. While I'm on break, I will play the video from last week of Hugo, the Shiba Inu, who's learned so many tricks in the past while. Although I don't want to leave because we've had more viewers than usual. So those of you that are watching this live that may be new here, understand that I'm just going to take a break for about a couple minutes. And the video that I'm playing is of my Shiba Inu. He's my boy. And he may be featured in tomorrow's painting pet portrait, although I haven't quite decided which pet to paint. I've even had comments about painting a sloth, I think. Which I'm open to all these ideas. There's just, I don't know, that's why I like that we have 3 streams a week now. So we can go through all these ideas. Yeah, to fix the drawing a little bit there. Which is expected. Don't expect myself to get everything right first try. I usually never do. So this is alright for the first hour. Okay, so we will take a break. Hold on, before that you wrote, I mean the color of the palette in order to see the strength of the oil colors. The color of the palette in order to see the strength of the oil color. Okay, gray. A neutral gray would be the best, which is what I just used here, like this. Use a neutral gray because it helps you see your values. It helps you see your lights look like lights and your darks look like darks. So the color of the palette itself, something like this would be good, like a gray. Because again, it allows you to see the colors. Now when there's a lot of color like this, then, well, that's not going to do much. But when you have a gray to work on, your lights will look like lights and your darks will look like darks. So a neutral gray would be best. So thanks for that comment. I'm going to take a break for a little while, but don't go away. I will be right back in a couple minutes. Hopefully you'll enjoy the video that I'll play in between. Okay, I'm back. So hopefully you're still here. Hopefully you enjoyed the little short video of Hugo. I'll make a new one in the near future. Now it's time to slow it down, and we're gonna get into the subtleties, as we don't have to work all around the painting anymore. So this is the point where I'm going to need your help. I need your help in order to maintain these live streams. I will start to ask a series of questions, and all you have to do is write down your answer or a comment, anything you would, or you could just say hello if you want to. So, my first question is a simple one, and that question is going to be, where in the world are you? Where are you watching this stream from? And I know that this part gets rather boring for many of you. So go ahead, tell me if this is boring for you. It won't hurt my feelings because I know that it is, statistically, more boring for most people. So, but anyway, where in the world are you watching this from? And I can already see the numbers drop. And I know that this can get rather tedious, but let me know. I'm always curious. And I'm just starting to add a darker value for this side plane. All of that initial sharp plane changes in the beginning were useful in order to basically kind of steer them into the relatively correct value ranges. Hey, Uncle Earl, thanks for watching from Puyallup, Washington. We got Jeremy from San Francisco. It's kind of funny, I'm actually wearing a shirt that says San Francisco. Funny thing is, it's not even my shirt. It is the wife's shirt that she bought in San Francisco. It's kind of one of those one size fits all. Now I'm using the green, the Terra Vert here. For the side plane. Something like that. That's about good. Hey Maeve. Thanks for watching from Scotland. Alright, I think in the future I'm not gonna say that this is the slow part. I think we lost like 10 people when I said that. Probably not gonna say that again. If you want, I can just put Hugo back on the screen, if that's what you really want. I'm going to sharpen the specificity of the shadow around the nose. Hey Giselle, you're from Maine. You lived in Virginia for many years, so feel the pain. Not much artist community there. I know, I hate this place. I hate this place. It's wonderful for a pool player, an aspiring pool player, or aspiring business owner, or something like that. But for painting, not so much. I hate this place. I mean, I love the apartment. I mean, this is a great apartment. I'm fortunate to be in a nice apartment in a nice and relatively safe area. I'm not blaming that, but dang. No art community. Except for some classes held by Robert Liberace and all those other Hollywood painters that have their own studio setups, you know? Nothing for a mere mortal like me. Is there much of an art community there in Maine? I guess in your notice you have changed the amount of colors on your palette. I add and subtract colors depending on how I feel. Sometimes I just want it to be more limited. Other times I want more color. There's no real reason for it. Like this lead tin yellow substitute is there because I used it for another painting and I just didn't know where to put it. So that's how it ended up there. But I kind of move them around a little bit, but I consistently try to keep white next to the yellow, and this is lead white, which is already dry. I kept it over there just so I would know the difference between the two. I appreciate the comment. Hey May, you're right. I find it's the subtle part of the portrait painting that's most interesting. Thank you, thank you. So we're going to be subdividing the planes into smaller and smaller areas, adding more specificity as we go. Some of these planes I will not be able to do as easily with this cheaper brush, so I will switch to the ultimate detail brush. This is the ultimate that I can think of. This is a cat's tongue, not made from cat's tongues. It is a cat's tongue size 4 Silverbrush Grand Prix. This is the Rolls Royce of subtlety in oil painting. Do not use this with acrylic because just don't. You just don't. So this has the ability to hold more paint, yet make a very subtle mark. And the fact that it can hold more paint than a synthetic allows you to charge up the brush like this. I'm putting a lot into this, and then add a little bit of medium, and it still carries quite a bit of paint. So the paint doesn't shovel around as much as it would with the acrylic brush. But with acrylic, you wouldn't have to worry about that anyway because you're painting over something dry. Hey Jonas. Welcome, welcome. Cadmium is nice because it's heavier, it's more opaque than a synthetic red, which leans pretty well to charging up a brush like this to apply kind of like a brownish color wet into wet like this. But you wouldn't need it with acrylic. You wouldn't need it as much with pastel either. But yes, a neutral gray palette for oil painting would be the best in order to see your colors. Absolutely. That was a great question. So there's two things you need to know, like memorize, when you're entering this stage. One is the generic plane head, which today's online class we actually reviewed it, the generic plane head, for students before getting into the planes of the face with their current project. You need to know your generic plane head, know it well, and know it from as many different vantage points as possible. You don't need to know that much about perspective because the human head is not impacted that much by perspective in most simple angles. Not like the head is a building or something like that. And the second thing you want to know is your generic sphere, and that's going to help you round things out. Remember, the title of this stream, Portrait Painting, is Simple or Not. If you know your generic sphere, it becomes much more simple. Every value has a certain angle with respect to the light. Every plane has an angle with respect to the light, which translates to a value. And if you can master your generic circle, generic sphere that is, and know the planes of the head, it makes this a lot easier to work with because things become more predictable. But you still have to train your observation skills. You can't just will it into being. You can't just wish and think that by sitting there and wishing things are going to get better. You have to put in the hours with specific practice. Practice does not make perfect. And you know the saying, perfect practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. But you must also have the discipline to do it. I've had many students over the years that say that they don't have the patience for long-term projects. They only want to do short-term projects. And I can't really get students past a certain point if they don't put in the time with longer-term projects. Because what you do is you take what you learn from long-term and it translates into your short-term. Because you know what to look for. You don't get stuck in a particular stage. Question from Jonas: should one have the lightest light as a pure white, or can one improvise as long as it's really light? Good question. I would suggest to avoid using straight white with oil paint. Not necessarily necessary with acrylic because it dries darker anyway. But with oil paint, you want to try to avoid the lightest light. And that's kind of hard to do with pastel also because you're layering. So you can use straight white because it won't end up being white right away. So with oil paint in particular, you want to avoid using straight white. Always mix a color for your lightest light. If need be, you can add straight white, but then dial it back down. Great comments. Great comments. Great question. I like that question. Everybody always avoid straight white in the sclera. For example, if you put straight white for the sclera, the white of the eye, if you put this white on the eye here, it's going to look like headlights. It's going to look like her eyes are casting a light as opposed to being in the light. So always avoid putting straight white for the white of the eyes. That's one of the top couple things I've seen most beginner artists do. And I hate sounding like a gimmick because to me I hate when somebody says, here's the top 5 things you need to know to supercharge your pool game today. That's not correct. I don't care if I hurt anyone's feelings saying that. I don't care. I want to tell you the truth. Truth is, one of the most common things I've seen is people putting white on the sclera. Because if you do that, it will make it look like there's headlights. But then again, I'm not very good at marketing myself, so all I'm doing is telling you from my teachings that I've had in the past. My teachers. But in oil painting, this Sable brush is a secret weapon of sorts. I'm going to add a little more light here. This is where if I want to have more thickness yet have more control, I could use something like a lead white. This is lead white here, which allows me to have more paint even though it's somewhat in between dry. At least there's some of it still available, like this little bit here. So lead white has this property that allows you to use more of it without raising the value, which allows you to have a thicker consistency of paint. You see that? See how the form rolls across the eye socket there, creating more depth. I'm glad you liked the explanation, Jonas. Now I'm going to add a darker red. Alizarin is a really useful color when you're trying to have a dark value that's still red. Like this here. Because cadmium red is opaque, you want a transparent color so that it doesn't overpower the value range of your darker colors. And this is what starts to, you see it there? No? See it? See it? Starts to make that more round, which completes the form. It will start to complete the curvature of the form, which is one of the things that makes the painting more believable to viewers. Simple as that. And you want to have a gradation of tone in the sclera, because the sclera is a sphere. It's like the cue ball in billiards. If you don't know what that is, it's the white ball that they use to hit the other ones in order to score, in order to win a game, basically. So I've got a little gradation of value there. Nice and simple. Try to avoid colors like pink and yellow in the sclera. So there's 3 different plane changes now in the sclera. Now we're carving into the bottom side plane of the tear bag, working our way up towards the upper middle portion of the tear bag. All of these parts are subplanes of the orbicularis oculi, the eye socket. Again, knowing the anatomy as it relates to planes of the face, particular planes of the face, also brings in an element of predictability. And the more predictable you can make something, the easier it will be to repeat. Kind of like knowing how to cook something, even though I don't like to use a recipe analogy because, well, you don't want it to be a recipe. You want it to be an exploration of sorts. But, for example, there's the difference between someone that knows how to cook something without needing a recipe, someone that always needs a recipe. You internalize flavor profiles when you don't need a recipe. Now, obviously, for certain things, you'll need a recipe, right? Specific things. Now, curvature of the lower eyelid, receiving a tad bit more light on the left relative to us as it starts to curve. And these are things you'll see in like Rembrandt paintings all the time. On a photo reference, they're very difficult to find. So oftentimes on the photo reference, you're going to have to make it up. You know, planes like this, I don't have to worry about curving that much. They already look strong enough as they are. Alright, so next question I'll ask those of you still remaining in this stage of the demo, or I hate calling it a demo, at this stage of the painting. My question to you is going to be, who is your favorite artist of all time, living or dead? Your favorite artist of all time, living or dead? And in this part, we tend to always get a variety of different answers. And it's okay if your answer is the same answer as it was last time. And of course, my answer is Nelson Shanks. Now on the nose, we already put a pretty decent level of refinement during the first part. So not really much left for me to add now. Now, I'm of course not trying to make it exactly like the reference. So there's going to be obvious differences at this point. Uncle Earl Jerry Yarnell, one of my students, mentions that name frequently. I think that's another video painter that does landscape. Cool. I think that's one of the first times I've heard that name on here. See how important alizarin is? In the past, alizarin crimson was a fugitive color. Nowadays, I believe most alizarin crimson is not the same as the genuine alizarin from the past, though you can still buy the original one from the past, but then you got to deal with a fugitive color. Fugitive meaning that when it dries over time, it starts to go from red to pink. So May wrote, normally I would say it's John Singer Sargent. Beauty of his skin tones and delicacy, painting of the face and often hands, compared with the scratchy and minimal way painted faces, fabrics, and textiles. Yeah, Sargent for his hands, the way he paints hands is very famous. Absolutely. And he himself did study a lot of Velasquez. He wrote, in fact, he hints at patterns and folds. He does. He did. And a lot of his commissions even. Even though it's not there, I'm gonna throw in a little hint of red reflection on the nose. I think this would be there. Granted, the red reflection over there. I'm using the lead tin yellow substitute quite a lot. Now we're going to alter the colors of these planes, but still I'm mindful of the fact that the photograph is not going to be the complete story. We won't know the complete story ever, really, because we'd have to be there painting from life. But I'm going to start to add more complexity to these planes. The color for each of these planes will become more specific now. So May wrote, however, as an overall painter, I love J.M.W. Turner. Let's see. Amazing body of work of watercolors. However, he's best known for his later wilder oils. Oh, Augustin, thanks. Thanks for that comment. I wasn't expecting that at all. Thanks, Augustin. I got a long way to go, Augustine. Long way to go. Maybe one day I'll earn that title. Got a long way to go. I appreciate it. So we have light, not as light, dark, but darker here than here. So this is where the planes start to become a tad bit more complicated. Where first it was this plane 1 and 2. Now it's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. It starts to subdivide, and we can play around with the color for these plane changes as well. If you can learn to incorporate color into your plane changes in a subtle way with portraiture, this won't be that subtle, but in a subtle fashion, it can really create more depth in your paintings. But this is how we create the illusion of something 3D on a 2D surface. Classical painting or representational painting is all about illusionism. How can we create the illusion of form? So May wrote, every artist has their own styles. So yeah, let's see. Style is more impressive. Paintings are recognizably yours. Oh, thank you. You think so? I don't know. What? I appreciate that. Appreciate it. That makes me feel a lot better because sometime soon I'll start selling these. And even prints of these paintings as well. At some point. It does scare me, I will admit, where my paintings fit in comparison to the rest of the world. Even with these live streams, I know that there's a bunch of other people that do these now, so it does concern me sometimes where I fit into all of this. So thank you for those comments. So Augustin, you're Mario Rueda, West Coast billboard painter. Foster and Kilser, cool. Gotta look up these billboard painters. So in order to achieve a higher level in form with these paintings, you have to be able to visualize the complete image in 3D. You have to be able to analyze, but at the same time you also have to have a lot of experience with long-term painting. And what you bring in from long-term will only sharpen your short-term painting. So we're 10 minutes away from the second break. So appreciate those of you that are still here. And appreciate all of you that were here and joined the live stream. And this will be available for you to watch as a pre-recorded video once the stream ends. And then I've even learned how to turn these into short time lapses, so I'll do that for Instagram and Facebook. And maybe some YouTube shorts as well once I learn how to do that. Little subtle colors like this, going cadmium green into a purplish brown. These are fun colors to create neutrals out of. You see, that's kind of like a custom neutral right here. Let's see here. Many YouTubers mentioned that creating shorts helped them with the algorithm. Yeah, I'm gonna use the the footage from these to create those. I'm not the most technological expert in the YouTube realm. But thank you for sharing that. That's going to be very useful for me. I think that algorithm hates me. But yeah, that'll be useful. Now we're pushing the color a little bit as we push the form. This is why I admire Nelson Shanks so much, because he's one of the few artists that, few representational painters that actually did this, that pushed color and form at the same time. Airily art. I don't know how to start to paint on canvas. Well, the best thing I would suggest is whichever material that you're using, start out by buying some, like a pack of cotton canvas, just like a pack of 5 or something like that, and you can even just get like a panel like this. This is a canvas panel, and just start to explore. I mean, painting a still life or painting a landscape. I think I have a couple videos titled your first. I have one that's titled your first oil painting, your first acrylic portrait. You can certainly use those. Again, those are for free. If you're interested in a more academic field where you take your knowledge, start from the beginning all the way up to this level and beyond, then I have my online classes for that. That's $10 a month, but again, there's tons of free content here on YouTube, not just from me, of course, but just pick something that's simple, like a still life. Like I have a video titled "Your First Oil Painting is a Still Life of an Apple." And you can even do that with water mixable or acrylic. So believe me, you could learn almost anything you want for free here on the internet now. But to take it to that next level, I always suggest getting feedback from others. So useful. That's how I started. I am not self-taught by any means. I had teachers available to me every week. So I am not a self-taught artist at all. Okay, got about 4 minutes till you get to watch my Shiba Inu do his amazing tricks while I take a break. And then we'll return for the final sitting on this one. Hey Craftomatic, I'm glad you enjoy the videos. You wrote, I've never done any painting that could be considered formal painting, Portraiture is what I want to do. I'm 65. Oh, no worries. Every time someone mentions, their age, I always remind everyone. I had a student once many years ago that started painting at the age of 90. Took my class at 90, and learned even faster than some of the teenagers. So you could start at any age. As long as you enjoy it and have the determination, you can learn it. There are much easier and more appropriate ways to learn portrait painting than what I did here. So again, if you're interested, definitely check out my classes. But if not, consider the classical start. Consider starting a painting with only light and shadow for the first 3 hours. Now, I can't do that here on YouTube because I'd probably bore people if I had only do light and shadow for 3 hours, but I would always suggest starting with a more classical approach before working your way up to something like this. And remember that the patterns are repeatable. And if you can memorize certain things like the generic sphere and the generic plane head, then it will make this more simple for you. However, it can become more complicated if you start to think about it as a human instead of a series of shapes. Say from Elin, you wrote, I find it tricky to paint into wet into wet without mixing into a layer below. Any tips? Of course, a lot of painting wet into wet has to do with how thick your first layer is. So my first layer, if you recall earlier in the video, I went in the first maybe 15 minutes, I went in with paint for the light. And that was important that I did that because over time, like the first hour or so, the paint actually starts to get a little stiff. So once it starts to get a little bit stiff under here after like an hour, then you can use a synthetic brush like this one, or you can use a Sable brush like this one and do things like this. Paint right onto that layer and have a somewhat of a delicate touch, and keep your brush, see where I'm keeping it here, at about an arm's length. Notice I still haven't gotten to the point where I need my my little rest. The past couple times I used a rest for my arm. So that's very much a paint handling piece of advice I have for everyone there. But excellent question. I really appreciate that question. Painting wet into wet with oil paint. Also, the oil paints that you use, if you're using water mixable oil paints, it's a little different than using traditional, but not that much. In fact, it's probably easier with water mixable because they get tackier faster than traditional oil paints. But developing a soft touch takes practice, but it's something that will also help you a lot when it comes to painting wet into wet. Thank you for that comment. Okay, I didn't even notice we were over the hour. So now we're gonna take our final break. Those of you that may be new, this is usually the point where I will put the video of Hugo, my Shiba Inu. He is gonna turn 2 years old soon. Let's see. Oh, you said you wrote water mixable oil paints. Oh, well, with water mixable oil paints, you just it's the same thing. It's just depends on what brand you use, but they do get tackier faster than the regular oil paints. But the same concept. It's really the same concept. So anyone that may be new, this is going to be the part where I take a break. I will return in just a couple minutes. But in the meantime, I will put a video of my Shiba Inu, who knows quite a couple tricks here. So hopefully you'll find this entertaining, and I will be right back. Okie dokie, I've returned. Now it's time to take this painting to a finish. So considering the vignette, the parts that you leave unfinished to complement the areas that are more finished, I like this kind of main diagonal here. So I don't think I really want to do anything different with this part. And vignette wise, I don't really have anything different other than adding more information to the hair here and just leaving this as it is. So that's what I'll do for now. Craft-O-Matic, you wrote this is, it's called, oh, the mall stick, yeah. I'm glad you love puppies. Yeah, my little star. Hugo is my little star, Elin. Yeah, I use a mall stick when necessary, of course. Yeah, Hugo is a wonderful doggy. I'm glad you liked the little intermission. Let's get to the background. So I'm going to have to utilize a different color. And so Augustin, you were saying how I have different colors, and I kind of just use them as I need them. Right now I need a little bit more of a blue. So I'm going to add a different color. I'm going to go into my paint box. It's not that fancy, it's just a paint box. I'm going to look for a color called Phthalo Blue, or Phthalo Turquoise. This is it, Phthalo Turquoise. And it gets way brighter than ultramarine blue, so it's more saturated. And keep these little tools handy in case one of these tubes is difficult to open. You don't want to mess up your hands trying to struggle with a paint tube. So I'll just put this somewhere over here. I don't need that much of it. So somewhere up there. And that's going to be Phthalo Turquoise. Gonna add it right to this mixture. As you can see, it's starting to show up there. You don't need a lot of it. It's a very strong color. Adding it to the top there. It's a very strong color, so use it sparingly. And it's a nice deep blue that you wouldn't be able to get without it. And that alone already gave more definition to the top. I may not even need more for that. Oh, no worries, Craft-O-Matic. It is a boy. He is my boy. Hugo, the Shiba Inu, of whom I will paint his portrait. Very likely I will paint his portraits tomorrow on the acrylic live stream, so definitely stay tuned for that. Now look at how deep and atmospheric this blue is. Much more life, I guess, or air to that shadow in the background than we had before. And I will use a Lizarin in the darks in contrast. So right here, Lizarin. Okay, so I'll use a little trick here is to use the skin color brush, add a little bit of the blue to it. Add this light back with a tad bit more blue. Not very much is needed for that. Let's see, seeing it with the little pliers reminds me that one of the tips I always pass on to others, keep one with your paints to open old tubes easily. Yep, definitely. Those tubes can get really difficult to open over time, I'm telling you. Hey Hansel dog, no worries, no worries. We'll be here for a little while longer still. So no worries there. I wish you could see what this color really looks like. The camera makes it look a little less, I don't know, it takes a little bit away from it. And you know, I'm gonna stand back and I might actually change my mind. I kind of want to fill this in. I didn't want to at first, but I think I'm going to. Sometimes you just gotta take a risk. Someone out there is probably screaming, "No, don't do it." But the thing is, sometimes you just gotta do it. Gotta try something. So phthalo turquoise, cadmium yellow. Now that is bright. But the secret is knowing how far is far enough with these colors. And do they work well in relation to one another? If this bright green was here without that red or that blue, it may be out of context. But that's what makes color so beautiful. It's so versatile. You can do so much with it. So let's just cover this bottom part. I want some of the brush strokes to show through on the bottom because Nelson Shanks just looks cool. Try to make this somewhat Nelson Shanks like, because why not? Try to strive for that. And I'll push this color even more. So I'll go straight back in with the cadmium yellow, which is another difference between oil paint and acrylic. You can get really bright colors with acrylic, but I think that with oil paint, because of the, I don't know how else to put it, but because of the toxicity in the oil paint, these bright cadmiums are just different. I don't want to say that they're more saturated, because I know that they're not. There's a lot of acrylics that are more saturated than your cadmium yellows, but there's a different kind of color that you can get. I think different kind of effect. Let's call it an effect. But later on we can compare them. I can go ahead and buy the heavy bodied or the soft bodied acrylics and we can compare them. And I think it's just a nostalgia, to be honest, with oil paint. I think it's more psychological. I'm beyond the point of telling you that one is better than the other. I think they can all do amazing things. Yeah, I think it kind of needed that. It's just my opinion. I'm not going to push this light as bright as it is up there, because that kind of bothers me for some reason. So I'm going to leave it the way it is here. And we'll just go right back into the subtleties of the face. I made the mistake of holding my paper towel while I was painting before, which you can do, and that's what Nelson Shanks and his students did, but I had gotten paint on my hands, so I had to go and wash my hands right away. Don't want to have lead or cadmiums on my hands. That's a no-no. But not the end of the world. Make sure that you have artist quality soap. Pretty strong soap to clean the lead off of your hands. And we'll go into this shadow. I kind of liked how sharp it was at first, but now it's time to start to round it out a little bit. If I had a bigger sable, I would use it at this point, but I think we'll do just fine. Going to add a lot of paint. Here's a very important paint handling thing. Add a lot of paint for soft edges. You want thicker paint for soft edges. I'm gonna add a little bit of red to the Terminator line. But yeah, I'll turn these into both YouTube shorts with time lapses for YouTube and for Instagram and for Facebook. So you haven't seen the last of me. What's wild is that this used to take me, getting to this point used to take me 3 individual 3-hour sittings in 2020. It used to take me 3 times as long to get here. And I guess through all the training I've been putting myself through, we are a lot faster, more efficient now. And I think a lot of it has to do with experimenting with acrylics and pastels. May pop up from the cadmium yellow and turquoise in the top and bright green mid-right just balances the painting. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that it balances. Sometimes we gotta take a risk. It was a calculated risk. And here, just like a pastel, I'm cross-hatching to get this shape. And shout out to the future owner of this painting. This painting will be for sale at some point in the future. And the future owner of this painting is probably watching at this point now. So shout out to you. I'll also be selling prints as well. Signed prints. My signature may not mean much to you, but I think maybe might mean something to somebody someday. And we're pushing the color. Hey Landon, how would you handle softening a line in an area that has already dried? With a similar thing to what I did right there, thick paint. As thick as you can to create a softer edge and to cover a line that has dried previously. Suppose from a transfer drawing or something like that. Thick paint. Now we're going to switch from the reddish hue that we added there to a cooler bluish gray hue down here. And we'll just mix right into it. Why not? It'll make it kind of purple, but that's all right. So Landon, you wrote, what would happen if you tried using thinner paints over, let's see, do you use less medium in the thick paints? If you tried using thinner paints, do you use less medium in the thick paints? So the medium doesn't depend on how thick or how thin you're painting, meaning how much medium you use doesn't depend on how much paint is on the brush, but rather what effect you're trying to get out of your paint. So for example, I will use, say in the background, I used it here, I'll use thick paint with Neo McGilp medium to create a smoother finish, but I will also use my medium, the same Neo McGilp medium with thinner paint to create an ink-like line, which is useful for things like eyelashes or the accent, a dark accent on the edge of the mouth. So it doesn't matter how much paint, it's not about how much paint you're using, it's the effect that you're trying to get. Great question. I like the question. So you can also get an ink-like line by using a ton of paint and more medium. However, if you use more paint and less medium, you can get a more broad surface like this. So this surface here, thick paint, less medium, but still enough medium to carry the vehicle of the pigment around the surface, or you can use less paint and more medium, yet still have a lot of paint, but more medium in comparison to that to create an ink-like line. gotta be very, very cautious with these edges now. Any one brush stroke could be the last. If I can do this right. So land in your throat. Do you usually use thinner when creating the ink-like line? Usually I'll use my Neo McGilp medium for that rather than thinner. So this is a Neo McGilp. Sometimes I'll use thinner if I don't feel like using my Neo McGilp. The thinner tends to eat away at the paint as opposed to the medium. I do appreciate these questions. Excellent, excellent. I agree, May. I agree. Neo McGilp is a jelly-like medium. That's what this is. I should probably hold it here since I'm gonna create a whatchamacallit, a time lapse for the painting. But so Neo McGilp is a jelly-like medium, also referred to as thixotropic, meaning it's solid when standing still and then fluid when motion is applied to it. The thing says maintains the body of oil colors, increases transparency and flow, and imparts a smooth, silky feel. Neo McGilp dries with a moderate rate and remains workable for hours. Neo McGilp gives colors a stained gloss. Shake gently before use. Oops. But yeah, I like it because when it dries, it doesn't sink in quite as much as if you were to use only something like linseed oil. Thanks, Augustin. Glad you liked the session. It's not over yet. We're still here. More subtlety. Landon Giro, do you ever use Liquin? Yeah, Neo McGilp is similar to Liquin. They're pretty similar, except Liquin dries faster, which can make it a little harder to work with, and it also has a stronger smell than Neo McGilp. Liquin was one of the first materials that my artist friends introduced me to long ago. But the smell is just a little too powerful for me. Now, of course, if you have a bigger space, then you have more ventilation for your material, so you may not notice the smell as much. Now I'm using that phthalo turquoise to push color relationships beyond where they were in the beginning. This is why color is not really a recipe. I cringe whenever I look at books that are like recipes to mix certain colors, because you have to be able to experiment with them and feel them out yourself. Basically, you'll learn how to think in color. Now, to me, I perceive this plane to be a tad bit more blue, more towards the blue than the surrounding planes. Landon, do you ever use dryers like, and I don't know what that one is, Japan H dryer to speed up drying time? No. The only fast dryers I've ever really used were Alkyd oil paints. And those are, I think, a little bit better because they already have the medium built in them. I think it's just a little safer than adding too much medium. I think in general you want to keep it as simple as possible in terms of what mediums that you use. Neo McGilp is supposed to be a kind of inspired by Merauge medium, which is a classical medium that was used a long time ago for similar purposes, for fast drying and for kind of like the gloss. So Merauge medium was made and is still sold to this day by certain companies, but it's made by using lead litharge with boiled linseed oil. It's actually kind of dangerous to make it. I know some people that make it. They have their own ovens to make it. I would never suggest you do that. But that's kind of where the inspiration for Liquin and Neo McGilp came from, but specifically Neo McGilp. But the only dryers I've ever used for a planned layered oil painting were Alkyd oil paints, because they already have the fast dryer built in them. Now, slight curvature for the superciliary arch here. Add some more red to it. Hey, Landon. No worries. Thank you for the questions, Landon. I always appreciate any art related questions, or any questions in general that are appropriate for YouTube or useful. Really helpful. Not just for the viewing experience, but for the YouTube computers. Now we've completed the curvature for the forehead just about. The last thing I do when I complete the curvature of anything is add the highlight, but I usually wait for that. Now hopefully you can see how the neutral gray tone of the canvas helped develop these values. Wow, only 20 minutes till the hour. Time does go by. Now we'll add the highlight, and I'm gonna put a little bit of phthalo turquoise into this highlight, just because I can. With some of the lead tin yellow. And you see that a lot in many Nelson Shanks paintings. The highlight itself has a big variety of color. A large variety of color, even in the highlights. A little bit of a spot here that was missed. Where's Randy to tell me that I missed the spot? Because I definitely missed the spot there. There we go. Well, we're almost there. Almost. Only some slight things to do. Barely anything now. Home stretch. And these I refer to as impossible subtleties. They're things that are difficult to notice unless you're really looking deeply into something. Yeah, I don't think we'll need the full 3 hours for this. We're pretty much almost there with this one. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, because the stream may end soon. But don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow, same time, for an acrylic painting. So shout out to anyone that's still here. You are the most dedicated. It's been a while. An entire 2 hours, 46 minutes. Okay. So that very well could have been the last brush stroke for this one. I will wait to sign this one. Probably sign it here, but once this is dry, as I do plan on putting it for sale at some point. So this is the end for this one. Please let me know if you have any last minute questions. I'll wait for just a minute. Hey Uncle Earl, my online classes, you can find them by typing my name, Yupari, and classes. Patreon specifically, Patreon, or just type Yupari online classes. It will show up. I think I'm the only Yupari offering online classes on the internet that I know of. Thanks for joining in. Craftomatic, Uncle Earl, May, and everybody. Thank you, thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed this painting demonstration. Remember, the schedule is Wednesdays oil painting, Thursdays acrylic, and Fridays pastel. Always at the same time, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Once again, thank you all so much. I wish you the very best. And I'll see you on the next one.